And we're live. So, good morning. Today on Live with Joan, we are in mid series in our series, How to Help Animals. And we have been having delicious conversations with experts on everything from uh, money, because that obviously helps animals. Sarah McCrum with money. We had Sophie Gamond on last week, where she talked at length about all the ways that she's transformed animals through photos. So she brought art to the world of helping animals. And today we have a very special guest. If you're new to me, my name is Joan Ranquet. I'm an animal communicator, author, TEDx speaker, and founder of Communication with All Life University. And Communication with All Life University is a place where you can learn animal communication or get certified, where you can learn energy healing or get certified. And we're opening up a nature and wildlife part of the school. And I feel like nature is going to be the buzzword in the next few years, because as we are in these perilous times, people really want to connect back to nature, even though we've become so far apart from it. When we look at all of the things that we are facing right now, we are brutal with animals, whether it's through factory farming or the genocide in shelters because we treat animals as throwaway objects, or the trophy hunting, poaching, the rape of the land. It goes on and on. And obviously, we can at some point become completely, completely derailed, depressed, disillusioned, completely paralyzed by what is going on. And yet, there are ways in which we can pick ourselves up. And I think one of the most important ways is through sacred activism. So we have this amazing guest today. And Claudia, can you go ahead and share Andrew Harvey's information?
Andrew Harvey is a founder and director of the Institute for Sacred Activism, an international organization focused on inviting concerned people to take up the challenge of our contemporary global crisis by becoming inspired, effective, and practical institutional and systemic change in order to create peace and sustainability. Sacred activism is a transforming force of compassion and action that is born of a fusion of deep spiritual knowledge, courage, love, and passion with wise radical action in the world. I get chills. That's the large-scale practice of sacred activism can become an essential force for preserving and healing the planet and its inhabitants. And he is a well-known author, has many books. In 2005, he wrote The Hope, which is the image you're seeing next to Joan, in the historic Santuario de Guadalupe in Santa Fe, New Mexico. You like how I said that? Mr. Harvey delivered his vision of the contemporary crisis now confronting us in today's world and its potential solution in what he has termed sacred activism, which he sees as the culmination of his life's work. In 2009, Andrew partnered with Hay House to publish The Hope, which went on to receive the 2011 Nautilus Silver Award for its influence upon social change. Awesome. The Hope is a compelling guide that helps people respond to current global challenges, yet also serves as a much-needed wake-up call to inspire action through sacred activism, the transforming force of wisdom, love, and compassion in action to effect radical change in the world.
All right, so bring on our guest.
Yes, ma'am.
There he is. I'm so honored to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thrilled to be here. Any lover of Linda Tucker is a friend of mine. Any lover of the white lions and of cats is more than a friend of mine, is an ally in the great work ahead. Thank you. And thank you for your beautiful work. I long myself to learn about animal communication. I've been practicing it, but without much success. So I would love to plunge into All Life University when I get a second or two in my crazy life. So thank you for your wonderful work.
Well, thank you. I have so many questions and so many directions I I mean, I feel like I could sit here for 10 hours with you, but we only have a limited time. And so I was hoping that you could give the audience a sense of just because you've led an amazing life, kind of a little snippet of how you got to be you, and then we'll dive into the dark night.
Well, how I got to be me, I was born in India, and I think that's probably the most crucial thing about my life, because although I was born to British parents, my father had Indian blood. And India gave me, as a child, beyond reason, beyond thought, a visceral experience of the divine and of the one divine. So I never believed that any religion held the absolute key. I always understood that there was one great love energy creating everything. And then I became an English intellectual because I plunged into learning and overachieving, and I became a professor at Oxford when I was 21. And I had a kind of radical nervous breakdown, a heart breakdown, really. Went back to India when I was 25, had a totally overwhelming series of mystical experiences which showed me I knew absolutely nothing about what is really real. And I gave up, in a way, my intellectual life, and I went on a long spiritual journey, which first took me to Ladakh, where I met a great Buddhist teacher who initiated me into Mahayana Buddhism, then to living in Paris, where I worked with the great translator of Rumi, Eva Sinfetrey-Meyerovich, and plunged into Sufism, and then took up a long, deep, mystical path with a Hindu teacher who initiated me into the Divine Mother. Then in my early 40s, met the greatest living Christian mystic, Bede Griffiths, who became my lead guide into the great mystery of the Christ consciousness and what's happening on the planet now. And out of all of that mix, what happened is that I truly woke up to the presence of the divine in and as everything, and to a vision of how we could deal with this absolutely apocalyptic crisis that we are in, and see it not just as this terrifying global dark night that it obviously is, but also as the birth canal to a wholly new way of being and doing everything through sacred activism, through the marriage at the deepest depths of profound spiritual awareness and love and passion for life with clear, wise, radical, urgent action. So that's been my wild, weird trajectory. And it gets wilder and weirder every moment. But I feel at this moment that I'm at my most useful, because I've been crying out in the wilderness for 20 years for people to wake up to the disaster. And for a long time, I was thought of as a rather endearing, if not completely crazy, eccentric, but now the world is listening because the crisis is here. And so this is a terrifying moment, but it's also a moment of overwhelming opportunity to put divine love and wisdom and patience and passion and compassion into radical action. And my profound cause is animals, as you know.
I feel like there's an evolution of divine love that we have the opportunity to breathe in if we
very much so moving. Because I think the key is embodiment. I think it's one thing to experience it and then to use that experience as a way of feeling very special and especially loved by God and selected to be somebody overwhelmingly important, and that's a very narcissistic way which a lot of the New Age has taken. But the real path is the path that the great prophets, that Jesus and the prophet and the great women mystics have taken, which is the path of realizing that when you experience divine love, it's because you must shoulder the responsibility of that experience, and the responsibility is to donate your whole life, to put it into action, to birth a new humanity out of the hot, smoldering ashes of the old.
One of the things that, and I love your book, The Hope. I read it years ago, and I just reread it, and I wanted to, well, I want to talk for 1 second about, you have a whole section on fire. And it's so funny. This winter, I've been making little fires at night, and the fire tells me every night, like, you have to sit here with me. You can't just start me. And I'm like, so I
Right.
did a lot of fire meditations all winter. And then when I was
Oh, yes.
reminded, when I saw that chapter again, I was like, oh my God, I love the fire.
Well, the fire is God. God is a huge, all-embracing fire. When you wake up to the divine presence, you realize it is a fire out of which everything is created, and the fire that burns, literally burns in and as everything. And it's the fire of love. And mystics know this fire very intimately. I know it. Rumi knew it, Kabir knew it. Everyone who comes on the threshold of divine revelation knows it. And the core of sacred activism is awakening this fire of love for everything that is actually the essence of our authentic divine consciousness.
And that brings me to, in order to get there, often we have to go through a dark night of the soul. And I always joke that in my 30s, I went through a dark decade of the soul. But
It could last a long time, yes. Well, the world is now going through it. The whole world is now in a global dark.
Yeah, and I feel like I got some good practice because we're in it.
Well, I think a lot of the people who are meant to help now had to go through a terrifying and difficult dark night themselves and discover what happens if you endure it, that you become a different kind of person, someone who is a warrior midwife for the new reality. And you can't discover that except by burning in the fire that burns away your false self, your masks, your narcissism, your addiction to your own life. What the Dark Night can do for people who understand the process as a great mystical opportunity is birth them into their authentic divine human self, which is always a humble self that wants to serve humanity in sacred action.
With a servant's heart, yeah.
Right.
So a lot of the people that tend to be, on these lives and watch, and I always say that when you come into my school, you come in as an animal lover and you walk
Yeah.
out an animal person, right? You're able to handle things.
Yes. I love that. I love that because there's a big difference, isn't there? How would you describe that difference?
What's that? I would describe that difference as, so many of us love animals, but it's this sense also of a little bit of a warrior, that in order to fight for them, we have to have boundaries, we have to have an awareness, we have to have discernment. We can't be all like, we're empathic, we act as their voice, we act as their, but we're also not, we no longer see them as objects. They're beings that have their own trajectory. Yeah.
I think there are three kinds of steps we have to take. The first is that you really have to go through a revolution in your consciousness, because you can love animals but still buy the patriarchal way of seeing animals as adorable and inferior and needing your protection. And that blocks you from the great realization that animals are just as sacred, just as important as you are, that you are equal to them and they are equal to you. And not only that, they have an enormous amount to teach us all. The second great revolution that has to take place is that everyone now has to wake up to what we are doing to animals. We've created a worldwide Auschwitz in which we are torturing them to death. This is a genocide on a massive global scale, and it is directly the result of our patronizing of animals, our using them for our own purposes, our denigration of their holiness. And the third thing that we have to realize, and this is what makes you into an animal person, I think, is that if we continue to do this, we will create, and are creating now, a tsunami of black karma that will wipe us off the face of the earth. Because when you wake up to the mother, the great mother, you realize that everything is unbearably, beautifully sacred.
Mm.
And if you violate that sacredness, there are consequences. And this genocide that we have created on the earth for animals out of our hubris and our madness is resulting in a huge wave of black karma that is now sweeping the earth and will wipe us out if we don't undergo a radical change and humble up and dedicate ourselves not just to the preservation of the human race, but to the establishment of safe zones and deep care on every level for animals of every kind. 1 million species are on the brink of extinction. And if they go, it won't simply be the disappearance of the most amazing animals, it will be also the catastrophic decline and trophic cascade of many, many environments, which will have a disastrous result upon human life as well. So that's our job right now.
Right now. And I always call it a genocide also. Thank you for sharing that view. And then the other thing is
the only word you could possibly use for what we are doing.
I know.
Right. And it is the most disastrous and catastrophic genocide amongst many others that we're doing, because think of what those 1 million species include. They include bees and insects, which are essential for agriculture. What would we grow without the bee?
Right.
It goes on, and it's so important to wake up to it, however initially paralyzing it is. You've got to see it, and you've got to pray it and practice at the deepest level to rouse that fire in your soul so that you can stand up and be their voice and fight for the preservation of the animals, politically, economically, spiritually, in every way that you are called to do so. This is urgent now, and it is urgent not only for the animals, but for the soul of the human race, which will be irretrievably damaged if we do not recognize the holiness of the animals and our deep sacred responsibility towards them.
Our deep sacred responsibility. And the planet. I mean, the planet is the home. And people are like, oh, well, we can just move to Mars. It's I don't want to live on Mars. I like it here.
Nobody's going to be able to live on Mars. And why would we want to move to Mars and spread the contamination of our hopeless, terrible, tragic dissociation from reality to Mars? We just create another madness there. We have to deal with what we've done. We have to go through a transformation. We have to urgently put love into action here and stop wasting money on this idiotic fantasy of space travel and start using those billions to feed the poor and secure massive wilderness areas in which animals can recuperate and live in freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
I
a
hope
lot.
you're listening, oh politicians of the world. But this is not going to come from the top, this revolution, you know that. It's got to be from the ground up. If you were waiting for the elites to have a great change of heart and put this kind of passion into practice, you'll be waiting in your comfortable drawing room and suddenly notice that all the trees have been cut down and all the elephants are dead and all the lions are dead and all the tigers are dead and all the fish are dead. So it's up to us now, up to everybody who's listening.
And for some people, I know that they will say, but I'm too sensitive, I'm too empathic, this hurts me too much.
This is rubbish. You're not too empathetic, you're human. What people have to realize is that this culture has dehumanized us, has made us into robots of greed, robots of dissociation. I'll tell you a story which encapsulates exactly how decadent our hearts have become. I gave a passionate talk at the UN to the spiritual groups of the UN about animals and about what we're talking about right now. And I gave it my all, and there was a lovely reception. And at the end, this beautiful older woman came up dressed in Chanel and pearls and said, "Darling, I loved your passion, but why do we need the animals?" I said to her, "What did you say? Why do we need the animals?" And I said, I'm terribly sorry. I can't talk to you at this moment because at this moment, all I want to do is to wring your neck, which is not a very spiritual thing to say, but it was actually what I felt because I thought, oh my God, that encapsulates the horrific arrogance of the human race that has created this situation in the first place. I am sick of being told that I'm too sensitive and too empathetic. No, I'm not. I'm just human. I'm a real human being. You're a real human being. And I'm sure that there are lots of people listening who are real human beings. And if you're a real human being, you have a heart that is shattered at the madness that the human race is now allowing. And that shattering is holy. But you cannot just be shattered. You have to use that heartbreak to really find a cause that you can dedicate yourself to and give it your all, risk your all, gamble your all to change the situation before it's too late and we annihilate ourselves and a great deal of nature, which is now entirely possible.
And it is breaking the heart open.
Right. It's shattering the heart open. And when you have a shattered open heart, you feel the agony of the animals, the agony of the poor, the agony of the tortured women, the agony of the 8 million people who are facing famine in Afghanistan, the agony of the world. You also feel, and this is why it's so important, you also feel the great joy of sharing in the divine heart. When the heart shatters open, you share the ecstasy and the agony of the divine heart. And when those two come together in you, the fire of true love wakes up in you. And when that wakes up in you, it gives you stupendous energy and focus and passion and real stamina and real focus on dedicating your life to do what you can to help the world.
Mm. Oh, you're speaking my language.
We're speaking the language of love. It's not
Mhm.
your language, it's not my language. It's the language of everyone who wakes up to the truth of the sacred world.
So I wanted to, when we look at this idea of the genocide, right, that we've created, there's a certain element of what you talk about at the end of your book, close to the end of your book, about facing evil. I'd love for you to share that story because we face it with certain people that don't give a crap about what they're doing, and you have an amazing story in your book.
Oh, you mean the story? Yes, well, this is an interesting story because I was part of a group that was planning the 1993 Rio conference, and we met in a very well-meaning, enlightened philanthropist's place in New York, and there were a lot of people around that table who really were very passionate about that conference and very hopeful that it would change the mind and heart of the world, which of course it didn't, but we were all hopeful for a second or two. And at that table, there was a very interesting man who said nothing, and he was an English billionaire. I wish I could tell you his name, but I shall refrain in case I'm saddled with a lawsuit. And at the end of the discussion, he came up to me and he said, you seem an interesting man. I'd like to have lunch with you, and I'd like to take you to lunch. So I said, well, I've always wanted to go to Le Cirque, and I know you can afford it, so let's go tomorrow. So I turned up at this glorious, expensive restaurant in New York. There he is in an immaculate Armani suit. And I sit down with him, and he's a very charming man. And he said, look, Andrew, he said, your kind of person will never win. And the reason why you'll never win is that you're far too naive about evil, about the dark. And I'm going to give you an education about it because I've chosen the dark. I know that what I do is ravaging the environment, and so do all my shareholders, and they don't give a damn so long as I produce the skinny. And I do what I do because I want yachts and houses, and I want to be able to walk across this restaurant to the telephone over there and ring anybody I like, the president of any country I like, because I'm one of the most powerful and richest people on the earth. And until you know that there is a whole group of people who have a great deal of the power, who feel like that, and who are utterly ruthless and utterly cynical, and will get rid of people like you as easily as swatting a fly, you just don't know anything about the world that you are in. And then he said, the activists are hopeless because they always destroy their own cause by hysteria and blame and shame and rage and calling other people evil and dark because they're so bloody righteous. And the mystics, as they are now, are absolutely hopeless because they're so absorbed with their own wonderful spiritual progress that they themselves are dissociated from the kinds of action that need to be taken. So as long as the two most intelligent and sensitive groups of people are both playing in a theater that is deeply narcissistic, neither of them have a hope against people as clear-minded and as radically self-absorbed as we are. That was his message. And I just took it. It was like a vast spear that went through my heart. And I was so grateful because he really woke me up. And I said to him, thank you. Thank you for telling me, because now I've aged about 100 years and I take your message very seriously, and I will dedicate my life to trying to change the ghastly picture that you have painted. And I bowed to him and I left the restaurant.
It's so startling, right? But we see exactly what he's talking about, even in the world of dog rescue, right? Like they
Right.
turn on themselves, and it is exactly. So, what do we do as a collective to reset this, where we do
Well, there's
have
only
power?
one thing, the one thing we can do, and the only force that can possibly change this is the force that I call sacred activism. Because, and it's very simple, because all great solutions are very simple. That doesn't make them easy, but they are
Right.
simple. If you take where most mystics are now, wrapped in self-absorbed transcendence instead of really dealing with the horror that's erupting over the world, and if you take where most activists are, drowned in fury and messianic fantasy, then you realize, oh my God, it's over if this continues. But if you step back and you look at the very best of the mystic, which is the passion to be one with reality, and the very best of the activist, the passion for equality and justice and harmony, then you realize something which changes your life, which is that if you bring together in yourself these two noble passions, the passion for being one with one and the passion for justice, then a new kind of being is born out of that fusion. And when I realized that, I prayed to be given a direct experience of it, and I had a dream. A dream vision. I was open-eyed, and I saw these two rivers of fire racing towards the horizon and meeting in a light Hiroshima, not a destructive Hiroshima, in the creation of a vast new force, real radiant, multicolored light. And I heard a voice, and I believe it was the voice of the Christ. And it said, when the river of the passion of God meets the river of the passion for justice, a wholly new force is born. And then I heard in my inner ear, I heard the words of Teilhard de Chardin, the great words when he says, someday after we have mastered the tides and gravity, we shall harness the energies of love. And then for the second time, we shall have discovered fire. And sacred activism is that fusion. And sacred activism is that fire. And we've seen in the 20th century how sacred activists like Gandhi, like Lech Walesa, like Martin Luther King, like the Dalai Lama, like Jane Goodall, have created enormous new possibilities out of impossibilities. And it is our duty now, all of our duties, to go on the journey to fuse those noble passions in our soul and come together and get going fast. It can happen, but it's going to demand total seriousness about the extremity of the situation and an abandoned surrender in faith to the divine that wants us to fuse these two so that we can be born into a wholly new level of our divine embodied humanity.
So we all have to step in.
Everybody who has an ounce of a heart and a tiny inch of a conscience has to realize that if we don't take this leap, each one of us and together, the world will die out, and soon. It's not 50 years or 100 years. It could be within the next 10 or 15 years. And I'm not hysterical about this. And many of the world's great environmentalists are saying, the head of the UN is saying this, the Kogi Indians and the indigenous shamans are saying this. The Dalai Lama has written a book called A Call for Revolution, saying just this. So it's time to wake up, everybody, and it's time to get real, and it's time to understand at the deepest level that this crisis could be our greatest imaginable opportunity, finally to become truly human and truly divine and truly unified and truly creative with the creativity of the divine and truly able to co-create a wholly new way of being and doing everything. And if we take that chance, if we take that leap, if we have the courage, amazing things are possible. Greta Thunberg knows this, because Greta isn't simply an astoundingly clear and fierce and noble spokesperson of this kind of truth. She's also a deeply spiritual, mystical person. She talks about what she calls the cathedral spirit. She knows from her own inmost experience that this fire has to be lit in the human heart. Look at her. Listen to her. She's the greatest teacher on the planet.
Yeah. Claudia, I know that people are probably going crazy, right?
Yeah. They are. Well, where do I start?
Let's just do a couple of comments, because I know that we have to wrap up quickly, but I want to be able for Andrew to hear just how loved I'm sure people are loving this, right?
Everybody, well, Susie said she's madly in love.
So yeah, you've got some new suitors. She's married, but
I'm taken by my cat, but I love the thought. I'm married to my cat. My cat was, but thank you.
Shannon says we have to have reverence for all life. It is indeed urgent. That is so important and timely information. Thank you. Kristen Hedberg, people are just quoting pretty much what they're hearing. The soul of the human race. Wow, this is honest, profound wisdom, my heart. Debbie O'Hara says, I'm sitting here going, yes, yes, yes. Susie Morrow says, the divine heart, oh my. And for me, because I commented, what hit me was you share the ecstasy and the agony of the divine power.
Yeah.
That was
yes.
Powerful. Kristen says, he so beautifully translates the language of the heart.
Thank you.
Marsha Weiser commented, he's right about the ruthlessness of the power mongers. Thank you for asking the question, Joan, about what we can do.
And I want to point out too. Go ahead.
There's so much we can do, and if you do me the honor of reading The Hope, and
The Hope is a great book,
which is very, very sacred to me, which is called Saving Animals from Ourselves, a manifesto for healing the divine animal within, which I wrote with the great Carolyn Baker. Spent a year distilling it into 150 pages for you. So if you love animals, this is a book that has gotten everywhere in the animal world, and it will really help you focus your passion for animals on real help, because many of the great animal activists are actually writing about what you can do in it. My great friend Jill Angelo, who has Moondog Farm, look it up, and has put her mouth where her heart is, and has turned her own home into a sanctuary for battered dogs and guinea pigs and God knows what. She has inspired me. She's the collaborator and the co-creator of Sacred Activism. So there's so much you can do. Hope is not a noun, it is a verb.
Yes.
And you don't have to have hope to act, because it's acting that creates hope. Don't wait for hope to seize you to act. Act, and hope will become you, and you will be hope walking.
Mm. Well, I have a feeling we're all going to read the other book, and then we're going to have you back.
I would love that. And it's a book that really goes into three things. It goes into, of course, the catastrophe, but it goes into the reason for the catastrophe, which is our massive dissociation from our own sacred animal. We kill the animals because we've spent thousands of years pushing down the glorious, beautiful, natural animal in ourselves. And we murder what we are dissociated from. And this is very important to understand. And then it goes into the enormous new discoveries about the phenomenal intelligence and wisdom that animals have. It's not new to the indigenous peoples, but science in the last 30 years has made staggering progress in opening up the real wisdom of animals, the wisdom of whales, the wisdom of dolphins, the wisdom of octopi, the wisdom of every single kind of animal. Suddenly, science, just as it's proving the mystics true in quantum physics, now science is awakening us to what the indigenous people knew from the very beginning, that animals are not just sacred, they're incredibly wise in ways that we're not, that we could, if we were humble enough and could communicate, learn from to beautify and transform our world. So this is a manifesto, this book, and I beg you to read it, because it has got some very new material in it. And it's a real attempt to reimagine the revolution of consciousness that we need to go through to truly adore the creation and give everything we are and have to protect it before it is too late.
I can't thank you enough. I want to, like I said, I want to invite you back, because I know
I'd love that. And
there's more of a conversation.
End up with a huge shout out for Linda Tucker's amazing work.
Yes.
If you want to help, look up Moondog Farm and Jill Angelo's amazing work, which is done on a shoestring, and help her. And if you also want to help, if you suddenly feel very inspired to be generous, look up Linda Tucker and the Global White Lion Protection Trust, which I have worked with for 15 years and learned so much from. The Global White Lion Protection Trust protects the holiest creatures on earth, as the African shamanic tradition believes, the white lions with blue eyes, the very rare, unique species that carries a divine charism. And the African shamanic tradition knows this. Linda Tucker is the chosen protectress of the lions. And if you read her book, The Mystery of the White Lion,
it's amazing.
It will completely change your whole vision of everything, as it changed mine.
Yeah, and she's going to be on, is it March 1st? I think it's
March 1st.
March 1st. So we have her in the series. We have Jill in the series. But right behind me.
On, how wonderful. Oh, that's fantastic.
Right above me is, I got that it's a white lion. I've got white lions everywhere in here. So
my flat is guarded by a wall of white lions. They protect my crazy self. And I feel that their presence around me, even in Chicago, which is
me too. And I even took, when Linda stays here, I put all my lion stuffed animals from childhood up above her and protect
Oh,
her, and
how
she loves it.
beautiful. Linda is one of the world's great heroines, and she
It's
is
true.
somebody who's leading us all in staking her life on her vision. And she's my soul sister and my dearest, dearest friend. And I love her for everything she is, everything she's given, and everything she continues to do with such passion and such hope. Linda has been through hell after hell after hell after hell. Her life is constantly threatened. The creatures are constantly threatened, but she never gives up
No.
because she knows that she is divinely inspired. She knows the lions are divine, and she knows that the task that's been given to her is of world importance, and she's going to give it her last drop of blood, and then some.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
Amazing.
we look forward to having you back, and I can't thank you enough for being our guest.
My
And
great pleasure. And thank you all for listening. And please read The Hope, and please read Saving Animals from Ourselves. I would be so honored if you would. And you'd find a lot of practical, down home advice. It's not just exalted rhetoric, it's a map of how to act urgently now. So get down and get going, my friends.
yes, roll up your sleeves.
Roll up your sleeves and be hope instead of just
Yes.
waiting for hope.